There is a mountain that stands alone. Not alone in the sense of isolation, it rises among hundreds of other peaks, surrounded by a landscape of snow and stone that stretches across the borders of Switzerland and Italy, part of that great spine of rock called the Alps. But alone in presence, in the way it commands attention, in the impossible geometry of its form. 4 faces, 4 ridges, rising from glaciated valleys to meet at a single point, 4,478 meters above the sea. A pyramid so perfect it seems carved by intention, shaped by some ancient hand rather than by the mindless forces of geology. When you see it for the first time, it stops you, makes you stare, makes you question whether something so symmetrical, so architecturally precise, can be entirely natural. The Matterhorn. Cervino to the Italians, Mont-Cervin to the French. But most of the world knows it by its German name, the name given by the Walser people who settled in the valley below, who lived in the shadow of this pyramid for centuries before it became famous, before it became an icon, before it became synonymous with mountains themselves. Matterhorn, the peak of the meadows. A prosaic name for something so extraordinary, so visually arresting, that it has become perhaps the most photographed mountain on Earth, its silhouette reproduced on everything from chocolate bars to corporate logos, instantly recognizable to people who have never set foot in the Alps. But before it was an icon, before it was a photograph, before it was a logo or a tourist destination or a bucket list climb, it was simply a mountain. Stone thrust up from the earth by forces operating over millions of years, carved by ice and weather into the shape we see today. And before that, it was nothing. Layers of sediment at the bottom of an ancient sea, accumulating grain by grain, compressed by weight and time into rock, waiting to be lifted by the collision of continents, waiting to become what it would become. This is a story about that mountain, about the stone itself, yes, the geology, the formation, the physical reality of rock and ice, but also about what the mountain became to human beings, how it transformed from a feared and forbidden place to an obsession, from a cursed peak avoided by the valley people to the ultimate prize of Victorian alpinists. How its first ascent ended in triumph and tragedy, how that tragedy helped birth modern mountaineering, how the mountain's faces and ridges became testing grounds for human ambition and human limitation, how this single peak, no higher than dozens of others in the Alps, became the mountain, the symbol, the archetype against which all others are measured. It is a story about human beings and stone, about our strange compulsion to climb things, to stand on top of things, to go where nature did not design us to go. About the men who died on that mountain and the men who survived. About guides and clients, about rivalry and cooperation, about national pride and personal ambition, about how a mountain can become an idea, can carry meanings far beyond its physical existence, can represent challenge and danger and beauty and achievement. But we must begin with the mountain itself, with the stone, with the deep time of geology, the processes that built this peak and continue to shape it. Because before we can understand what the Matterhorn means to human beings, we must first understand what it is, must descend into the eons before consciousness, before life, before anything resembling the present world, to watch continents drift and collide, to see oceans close and mountains rise, to witness the birth of the Alps, and within that birth, the emergence of one particular pyramid of stone. The story begins, as all such stories must, in darkness and pressure, in time so deep that years become meaningless, where change is measured in millions and tens of millions of years, where entire mountain ranges rise and are worn away, where seas open and close, where the surface of the planet reorganizes itself according to the slow convection currents in the molten rock below. The story begins with Pangaea, that ancient supercontinent, beginning to break apart around 200 million years ago, fragmenting into the landmasses we know today, creating new oceans as it did so. Between the fragments that would become Africa and Europe, a sea opened. Geologists call it the Tethys Ocean, and it was vast, warm, tropical. For tens of millions of years, sediments accumulated on its floor, the remains of countless organisms, lime and silica, sand and mud, building up layer upon layer, compressed under their own weight, becoming rock. Limestone formed from the shells and skeletons of marine life, sandstone from accumulated grains, shale from compressed mud. The floor of the Tethys was becoming a record of time, each layer a chapter in a story that would not be read for eons yet. But the continents were still moving. The African plate was drifting northward, driven by the same convective forces that had broken Pangaea apart, and it was on a collision course with Europe. The closing of an ocean is not a sudden thing. It happens at the speed of fingernail growth, a few centimeters a year, imperceptible on human scales, but inevitable on geological ones. The Tethys Ocean began to narrow. The sediments on its floor began to buckle, to fold, to be pushed upward as the two continental masses came together. This is how mountains are born, not instantly, not catastrophically, but through the patient application of tectonic force over millions of years. The rock that had been lying horizontal at the bottom of an ancient sea was tilted vertical, folded, thrust upward, layer upon layer of sedimentary rock containing fossils of sea creatures lifted kilometers into the air. The collision zone between Africa and Europe became a landscape of rising peaks. The Alps were being born. This began around 50 million years ago and continues, in a sense, today. The plates are still moving, still colliding. The Alps are still rising, though now the rate of uplift is balanced or even exceeded by the rate of erosion. But 50 million years ago, the rise was dominant. Mountains thrust upward, reaching heights that might have rivaled or exceeded the modern Himalayas. And the rock that would become the Matterhorn was among these uplifted layers, pushed skyward by forces vast beyond comprehension.
But uplift alone does not create the Matterhorn's distinctive shape. Many mountains are tall. What makes the Matterhorn unique is its geometry, its pyramidal perfection. And that shape comes not from uplift, but from erosion, from the patient work of ice and water wearing away stone, carving and sculpting over millions of years. The key is glaciation. As the mountains rose, they disrupted atmospheric circulation, created their own weather. Snow fell on the high peaks and, during ice ages, did not melt. It accumulated, compressed into ice, formed glaciers. These rivers of ice flowed down the valleys, grinding at the rock beneath them, plucking away blocks of stone, carrying sediment, slowly carving deep U-shaped valleys into the landscape. The Matterhorn sits at the intersection of four such valleys, four glaciers flowing away from the peak in four directions. And as these glaciers eroded, they cut back into the mountain from four sides simultaneously. Imagine a pyramid being carved from a larger block of stone by cutting away material from four faces. That is essentially what happened here. The glaciers carved steep walls, cirques, and faces on each side of the mountain, removing so much material that what remained was a narrow pyramid, four ridges rising to meet at a single point. The result is the shape we see today. The Hornli Ridge rising from Zermatt on the Swiss side, the Zmout Ridge to the west, the Italian Ridge, also called the Lion Ridge, descending toward Breuil in Italy, and the Fergan Ridge to the east. 4 ridges, 4 faces meeting at the summit. The faces themselves are severe, near vertical walls of rock and ice, swept by avalanches, hung with glaciers, hostile to anything resembling easy passage. The ridges are less steep, but still formidable, knife edges of stone with 1,000-meter drops on either side. And the stone itself is complex. The Matterhorn is not a single type of rock, but a geological layer cake, twisted and folded by tectonic forces. The lower portions are primarily gneiss, metamorphic rock formed under heat and pressure. Higher up, limestone and other sedimentary rocks appear, remnants of that ancient ocean floor now kilometers above sea level. Near the summit, the rock changes again, harder, more resistant layers that have survived erosion better than the softer stone below, forming the final pyramid. This geology matters because it affects how the mountain is climbed. Different rock types have different characteristics, different friction, different crack systems, different stability. The Matterhorn's mixed geology means that climbers must adapt constantly, must read the rock, must understand what they're climbing on. And the layered structure means that certain bands of rock are weaker, more prone to rockfall, more dangerous. The mountain is not just steep, it is actively unstable in places, constantly shedding small pieces of itself, eroding even now, continuing the process that shaped it. But for millions of years, no one climbed it. No one even saw it. No human eyes existed to appreciate its symmetry. It rose from its glaciated valley, magnificent and meaningless, a form without an observer. The ice advanced and retreated through multiple glacial cycles, carving and recarving the valleys, polishing the rock, making the pyramid sharper, more defined. Weather struck it, lightning, wind, the thermal cycling of day and night causing the rock to expand and contract, fracturing it, weakening it. Avalanches of snow and rock thundered down its faces. The mountain existed in pure physical process, without narrative, without meaning, without name. And then, relatively recently in geological terms, perhaps 50,000 years ago, human beings arrived in Europe, Homo sapiens spreading from Africa, reaching the Alps. These early people were hunter-gatherers, moving with the seasons, following game, gathering plants. They would have seen the mountains from a distance, seen snow-covered peaks rising above the valleys, but they did not penetrate far into the high Alps. There was no reason to. The resources they needed, game, plants, water, existed at lower elevations. The high mountains were barren, dangerous, difficult to cross. They were obstacles, not destinations. This pattern persisted for tens of thousands of years. As human culture developed, as agriculture began, as permanent settlements formed, the Alps remained largely avoided. People lived in the valleys, farmed the lower slopes where soil and climate permitted. But the high peaks were empty, unvisited. They existed on the periphery of human awareness, seen but not known, named but not known. In the valley below the Matterhorn, a settlement eventually formed. The Walser people, a Germanic-speaking culture from the Valais region, moved into these isolated valleys around the 13th century. They built stone houses with thick walls and small windows against the cold. They grazed animals on the high meadows in summer, brought them down in winter. They cut hay from the slopes, stored it against the long winters when snow buried everything. It was a hard life, isolated, sustained by subsistence agriculture and whatever small trade could be managed with the outside world. They called their settlement Zermatt, the name probably deriving from Zermatt, meaning at the meadow. And they could see the mountain from their valley, this impossible pyramid rising to the south, dominating the view. They gave it a name, Matterhorn, the peak above the meadows. But they did not climb it, did not attempt it, did not, as far as any record suggests, even consider climbing it. Why would they? From the valley, the Matterhorn looks impossible. Sheer walls of stone and ice, slopes steep enough that snow cannot cling to them, ridges so narrow they seem barely to exist. Even to people accustomed to mountain terrain, accustomed to scrambling on steep slopes to reach summer pastures, the Matterhorn was clearly something else entirely. It was not a place for goats or humans. It was a place for birds and wind and nothing else. And beyond the practical difficulties, there were cultural barriers. In medieval and early modern Europe, mountains were not viewed as we view them today. They were not beautiful, not sublime, not destinations for recreation or spiritual uplift. They were cursed places, wastelands, the realm of demons and dragons. Literature and art from this period consistently portrays mountains negatively, as barriers, as dangers, as places of exile and punishment. Dragons lived in the high places, according to folklore. Demons walked the glaciers. The air at high altitude was believed to be poisonous, driving people mad. Storms were sent by malevolent forces.
The Matterhorn, with its severe appearance, its isolation, its obvious danger, fit perfectly into this worldview. It was not a place to be visited. It was not even a place to be contemplated. It simply was, a feature of the landscape, permanent and immovable, like the sky or the sea. The people of Zermatt lived their lives in its shadow, farmed and herded and died, generation after generation, and the mountain remained untouched, unclimbed, barely thought about, except perhaps as a weather indicator or a landmark for navigation. This attitude toward mountains was not unique to Zermatt or even to the Alps. It was the prevailing view across European culture. When people had to cross mountain passes for trade or travel, they did so quickly, nervously, aware of danger. Guides were hired not to take people up mountains, but to lead them safely through passes, to show the way across glaciers, to avoid crevices and avalanches. The goal was always to get through the mountains, to reach the other side, to return to the safety of lower ground. But attitudes were beginning to shift. Slowly, gradually, through the 17th and 18th centuries, a new way of seeing mountains was emerging. It started with a few eccentric travelers, with artists and poets who began to find beauty in wild landscapes, who started to write about mountains in terms that were not purely negative. The Romantic movement in art and literature celebrated nature, especially nature in its most dramatic forms. Mountains began to be described as sublime, as awe-inspiring, as places where one could feel closer to God or to fundamental truths about existence. This was a profound shift in perception. Mountains went from being wastelands to be avoided to being sublime landscapes to be appreciated. And from appreciation to a desire for closer encounter was a short step. If mountains were beautiful, if they inspired awe, then getting closer to them, climbing them, reaching their summits became desirable. Not for any practical reason, there was nothing on top of a mountain that anyone needed, but for the experience itself, for the achievement, for what it felt like to stand in a place few or no others had stood. The first recorded mountain climb purely for the sake of reaching the summit was in 1336, when the Italian poet Petrarch climbed Mont Ventoux in southern France. He wrote about the experience in philosophical terms, comparing the physical ascent to spiritual elevation. But this was an isolated incident, far ahead of its time. It would be centuries before mountain climbing became anything approaching common. The real beginning of mountaineering as an activity, as a pursuit in itself, came in the Alps in the late 18th and early 19th centuries. Scientists began to take interest in the high mountains, glaciologists wanting to study ice, geologists wanting to examine rock formations, naturalists interested in how plants and animals adapted to high altitudes. These early explorers hired local guides to take them safely through difficult terrain, and sometimes pursuit of scientific knowledge required reaching summits. Mont Blanc, at 4,808 meters, the highest peak in the Alps, was the great prize. Multiple attempts were made through the 1770s and 1780s. Finally, in August 1786, two men, Jacques Balmat, a local guide, and Michel Paccard, a doctor, reached the summit. It was a sensation. People had wondered whether it was even possible for human beings to survive at such altitudes. Balmat and Paccard proved it was. This success sparked interest across Europe. If Mont Blanc could be climbed, what about other peaks?
The early 19th century saw ascents of many major alpine summits. Guides from the valleys, men who knew the mountains from hunting and chamois hunting, from crossing passes, from local knowledge accumulated over generations, found new employment leading wealthy visitors on climbs. A pattern emerged. British aristocrats and upper-middle-class adventurers would travel to the Alps, hire local guides, and attempt peaks. The British, in particular, became obsessed with alpine climbing. This was the Victorian era, the height of British imperial power, a time when exploration and conquest of territories, of challenges, of nature itself were seen as noble pursuits. Climbing mountains fit perfectly into this worldview. It was difficult, dangerous, required courage and endurance, allowed men to prove themselves. And it was still relatively accessible. Unlike exploring Africa or the Arctic, climbing in the Alps required only a train journey to Switzerland or Austria. By the 1850s, mountaineering had become fashionable among a certain set of British gentlemen. They formed the Alpine Club in London in 1857, the first organization of its kind, dedicated to mountain exploration and climbing. Its members compiled records of ascents, published journals, compared routes and techniques, and they began systematically attempting all the major unclimbed peaks of the Alps. This period, roughly 1854 to 1865, became known as the Golden Age of Alpinism. Peak after peak that had never been climbed was ascended for the first time. The Matterhorn in 1854, the Dufourspitz, highest summit of Monte Rosa in 1855, the Eiger in 1858, the Barre d'Écrin in 1864. The list grew steadily. Each first ascent was documented, celebrated, analyzed. Routes were described, difficulties catalogued, opinions offered about what should be attempted next. And increasingly, attention focused on the Matterhorn. It was not the highest peak in the Alps. Mont Blanc exceeded it by hundreds of meters, and Monte Rosa was also higher, but it was the most striking, the most visually dramatic, the most obviously difficult. Those sheer faces, those narrow ridges, that perfect pyramid pointing at the sky. It stood unclimbed, not because no one had noticed it, not because it seemed unimportant, but because it seemed impossible. The mountain repelled attempts. Its steepness, its rockfall, its exposure to weather, everything about it said no. But to a certain type of person, no is the most motivating word in any language. And by the early 1860s, multiple climbers were fixated on the Matterhorn, were making reconnaissance trips, were attempting routes, were becoming obsessed with being the first to reach its summit. The mountain had gone from being ignored to being the ultimate prize, the final great unclimbed peak of the Alps, the test that would separate the truly great climbers from the merely competent.
Among those obsessed was a young Englishman named Edward Whymper. Born in London in 1840, Whymper was not from the aristocratic class that dominated the Alpine Club. His father was a wood engraver, and Edward followed the same trade, showing talent in drawing and illustration. In 1860, at age 20, he was commissioned by a publisher to travel to the Alps and make sketches for a book. This journey changed his life. He saw the mountains, felt their pull, and became instantly and completely captivated. Whymper was ambitious, competitive, physically tough, and stubborn to a fault. He began climbing, initially with guides, then increasingly independently. He was not a particularly graceful or technical climber. His approach was often brute force, sheer determination overcoming obstacles. But he was strong, he had good endurance, and he had an absolute refusal to give up. By 1861, he had made several first ascents of significant peaks, and he had seen the Matterhorn. His first attempt on the mountain came in August 1861, approaching from the Italian side, trying the southwest ridge that rises above the village of Broyle. He didn't get far. The route was obviously difficult, beyond what he could manage at that point, but the attempt fixed the mountain in his mind.
He would return repeatedly, obsessively, attempt after attempt, failure after failure, learning the mountain, studying it, becoming more determined with each defeat. Between 1861 and 1865, Whymper made 8 attempts on the Matterhorn. Most were from the Italian side, where he believed the route looked most feasible. He tried different approaches, different tactics. He climbed with various guides, with other British climbers, sometimes alone. He spent days on the mountain, bivouacking on narrow ledges, enduring storms, retreating when conditions became impossible. He became intimately familiar with the southwest ridge, with its difficulties, with exactly how far he could get before being turned back. But he was not alone in his obsession. On the Italian side, a mountain guide from Broyle named Jean-Antoine Carrel was equally fixated on the Matterhorn. Carrel was a local man, born in the shadow of the mountain. The Italians called it Cervino, and he had been attempting it since the late 1850s. For Carrel, the ascent was not just personal ambition, it was a matter of national pride. The border between Switzerland and Italy ran somewhere near the Matterhorn's summit. The exact line was disputed, and Carrel believed passionately that Italians should be the first to climb their own mountain. Carrel was an excellent climber, skilled on rock, strong and determined. He knew the southwest ridge better than anyone. He had made multiple attempts, had pushed the route higher than anyone else, and he had climbed with Whymper on several occasions, guiding the young Englishman, teaching him about the mountain. But their goals were ultimately incompatible. Whymper wanted to be the first to climb the Matterhorn, and he didn't particularly care which route or from which side. Carrel wanted specifically to climb it from Italy, and he wanted the Italian flag on the summit. By 1865, the competition was intense. Whymper was in the Alps for another season of attempts. Carrel and a group of Italian climbers were also preparing. Both groups had their eyes on mid-July. The weather window was narrowing as summer advanced, but conditions seemed stable. Both groups were experienced, skilled, determined. It was a race, though perhaps neither man would have described it that way. But everyone involved knew whoever reached the summit first would claim not just personal achievement, but a place in history. The Matterhorn was the last great alpine peak. Its first ascent would mark the end of the Golden Age, the completion of the conquest of the Alps. The stage was set for one of the most dramatic events in mountaineering history, an event that would end in both triumph and tragedy, that would cost 4 men their lives, that would haunt Edward Whymper for the rest of his days, and that, despite the deaths, despite the controversy and recriminations, would mark the birth of modern mountaineering as we know it. But before we come to that fateful climb, we must understand both men more fully. Whymper and Carrel, the Englishman and the Italian, both obsessed with the same mountain, both convinced of their ability to climb it, both about to have their lives changed forever by what would happen on the Matterhorn in July 1865. Edward Whymper by 1865 was 25 years old. He had spent 4 alpine seasons climbing, had made first descents of several significant peaks, had developed a reputation for determination bordering on recklessness. He was not universally liked. His competitive nature, his sometimes abrasive personality, his willingness to push himself and others to extremes put some people off, but no one questioned his commitment or his physical toughness. He could endure cold, hunger, exhaustion, and keep going when others would quit. His approach to climbing was methodical. After each failed attempt on the Matterhorn, he would analyze what went wrong, what could be done differently. He studied the mountain from all sides, made sketches and notes, talked to guides about possible routes. He accumulated knowledge systematically, building toward the eventual solution. His failures on the southwest ridge led him to question whether that was actually the best route. Maybe the problem wasn't his climbing ability or determination. Maybe the problem was the route itself.
This was a revelation. All his attempts, all Carrel's attempts, had focused on the Italian side because that was where the route looked obvious from below. But maybe they had been wrong. Maybe the north face, the Hornley Ridge, was the key. Whymper decided to attempt it. He recruited a guide from Zermatt named Michel Croz, considered one of the best mountaineers of the era. Crows agreed that the Hornley Ridge looked promising. They made plans to attempt it in mid-July, as soon as Crows finished guiding another client. Meanwhile, on the Italian side, Carrel was organizing his own attempt. He had financial backing from the Italian Alpine Club, which saw the first ascent of the Cervino as a matter of national prestige. He had assembled a strong team of Italian guides, and he had information. He knew Whymper was in the region, knew the Englishman would almost certainly make another attempt. Carrel was determined to beat him to the summit. What followed was a comedy of errors and miscommunication, of assumptions and missed connections that set up the dramatic race. Whymper believed he had an understanding with Carrel that they would attempt the mountain together from the Italian side. Carrel, however, was committed to his Italian team and his Italian route. When Whymper arrived in Brule in early July, expecting to climb with Carrel, he discovered that the guide had already departed with the Italian party, heading up the southwest ridge without him. Whymper was furious. He felt betrayed, though Carrel would have argued there had been no explicit agreement. Regardless, Whymper now knew he was in a race. The Italian team was on the mountain, moving toward the summit. He had to act immediately or lose his chance entirely. He rushed back to Zermatt, a journey that required crossing a high pass, a difficult trek even without the urgency Whymper felt. He arrived exhausted but determined. He found Michel Croz. He recruited additional climbers, Lord Francis Douglas, a young Scottish nobleman, Charles Hudson, an experienced mountaineer, Douglas Haddo, a less experienced but enthusiastic climber, and 2 local guides from Zermatt, Peter Taugwalder and his son, also named Peter. It was not an ideal team. Hudson and Croz were excellent, experienced, skilled, strong. Douglas was capable, but Haddo was questionable, inexperienced, not proven on difficult terrain. And assembling the team had been hasty, driven by the urgency of beating the Italian party. Whymper later admitted that in his haste and anger at Carrel, he made decisions he might not have made under calmer circumstances. But there was no time for careful consideration. The Italians were already on the mountain. If Whymper was going to have any chance of being first to the summit, he had to act immediately. On July 13, 1865, the group departed Zermatt, hiked to the base of the Hornley Ridge, and bivouacked, preparing to start the climb the next morning. On the same day, higher on the southwest ridge, Carrel and his Italian team were also bivouacking, preparing for their own summit push. 2 parties on opposite sides of the same mountain, separated by rock and ice, both aiming for the summit, neither knowing exactly where the other was or how close they were to success. July 14, 1865, dawned clear and cold. Both parties rose early and began climbing. The Italian team on the southwest ridge faced technical difficulties, steep rock, sections requiring careful climbing, slow progress, but they were making steady upward progress, climbing strongly, confident they would reach the summit. On the Swiss side, Whymper's party was moving faster than expected. The Hornley Ridge, while steep, was proving more straightforward than anticipated. The rock was solid, handholds were plentiful, the route was obvious. Croz, leading, climbed quickly. The others followed, and while Haddo was slower than the rest, he was managing. They climbed through the morning, gaining altitude rapidly, the summit visibly drawing closer. Neither party knew how close the race was. The mountain's bulk separated them. They couldn't see each other, had no way of knowing what progress the other was making. Both groups were focused on their own climb, on the rock in front of them, on the steadily decreasing distance to the summit. Around 1:40 p.m., Whymper's party reached the final section below the summit. They could see the top now, close enough to touch. Croz led the final scramble, then stood up straight. He was on the summit. The others followed quickly. Edward Whymper, Michel Croz, Lord Francis Douglas, Charles Hudson, Douglas Haddo, the elder Taugwalder, and the younger Taugwalder. 7 men standing on top of the Matterhorn, the first humans ever to reach that point. The elation was immediate and profound. They had done it. The impossible mountain, the peak that had repelled all attempts, was climbed. Whymper described the moment in his later account. The summit was ours. They embraced, shouted, laughed. The view was extraordinary. Peaks stretched in all directions, the Italian plain visible in the haze to the south, the full sweep of the Alps spread before them. And then someone looked down the Italian ridge and saw figures. Carrel's party, still climbing, perhaps 200 meters below the summit. They hadn't reached it yet. Whymper's group had won the race. Whymper later admitted to a moment of vindictive pleasure. After all the failed attempts, after Carrel's seeming betrayal, after the desperate rush to get to the mountain in time, he had won. To make absolutely sure the Italians understood what had happened, the party on the summit began shouting, waving, throwing stones down the Italian face to attract attention. Eventually, Carrel's group noticed. They saw figures on the summit. They realized they had lost. Carrel's reaction when he later wrote about it was one of devastation. Years of attempts, the national pride invested in the climb, the belief that he and his Italian companions would be first, all of it undone. They were beaten by Carrel, whom Carrel had guided and taught, by a route they hadn't seriously considered, by a matter of hours. They retreated, defeated, and began the long descent back to Brule. On the summit, Whymper's party spent about an hour enjoying their triumph. They took in the views, ate some food, rested. But they knew they couldn't stay long. Descent is often more dangerous than ascent, and they had a long way to go. Around 3 p.m., they began the descent. The order of descent was crucial. In mountaineering, when a party is roped together on difficult terrain, the order matters. The strongest, most experienced climbers should be at the front and back, with weaker climbers in the middle, protected on both sides. The group reorganized for descent. Crows first as the strongest climber, then Haddo, the weakest, then Hudson, then Douglas, then the elder Taugwalder, then Whymper, and finally the younger Taugwalder at the rear. They were roped together, though with 2 separate ropes, the first 4 men on one rope, the last 3 on another.
They began descending carefully. The rock was steep here, requiring faces facing into the mountain, hands and feet finding holds, moving slowly and deliberately. Crows was guiding Haddo, telling him where to place his feet, keeping him steady. The descent was going well initially. They had dropped perhaps 50 meters below the summit when it happened. No one ever determined exactly what caused it. The most likely explanation is that Haddo slipped, lost his footing on a smooth patch of rock, or made a misstep, or simply succumbed to exhaustion and fear. He fell, and falling pulled Crows off balance. Crows fell. Both men, roped together, fell and pulled on Hudson. Hudson fell. 3 men falling, pulling on Lord Douglas, who was anchored only by his grip and the rope connecting him to Taugwalder above. The rope was thin, a rope that would later become the center of enormous controversy. It broke. Between Douglas and Taugwalder, the rope snapped, and 4 men, Crows, Haddo, Hudson, Douglas, fell, tumbling down the north face of the Matterhorn, bouncing off rocks, falling approximately 1,200 meters to the Matterhorn glacier below. The 3 survivors, Whymper and the 2 Taugwalders, were left on the ridge, shocked, barely able to comprehend what had just happened. One moment, they had been descending carefully. The next moment, 4 of their companions were gone. The rope had broken, and they stood on the steep rock with the knowledge that 4 men had just died. They could not continue immediately. The shock was too great. They found a ledge and waited, trying to process what had happened, knowing they would have to descend, but needing time to gather themselves. Finally, numb and moving mechanically, they continued down. The descent took hours. They had to move slowly, carefully, knowing that another mistake would be fatal. It was dark when they finally reached safe ground. The next day, they returned to Zermatt with the news. The village was devastated. 4 men dead on the mountain that had finally been climbed. The triumph was immediately overshadowed by tragedy. A rescue party was organized to recover the bodies. 3 were found: Crows, Haddo, and Hudson, broken on the glacier. Lord Douglas's body was never recovered, presumably lost in a crevasse or under ice. The aftermath was catastrophic for Whymper.
He had achieved what he wanted, the first ascent of the Matterhorn, but at what cost? 4 men dead, including his friend Lord Douglas, including the brilliant guide Michel Croz. The British press seized on the story, not celebrating the achievement, but condemning the recklessness, the danger, the cost. Queen Victoria was reportedly so disturbed that she considered banning mountaineering entirely. An inquiry was held. Questions were asked. Why had the rope broken? Was it a faulty rope, inadequate for the task? Or had it been cut? Had someone above deliberately severed it to save themselves? Whymper was questioned intensively. So were the Taugwalders. The broken rope was examined. It was thin, weaker than the main rope being used. Why had such a thin rope been used in the crucial position between Douglas and Taugwalder? No definitive answers emerged. The rope was indeed weaker than it should have been, but whether this was an oversight in packing or a deliberate choice or simply what was available was never established. The theory that it had been cut was investigated, but ultimately dismissed. The break showed the characteristics of snapping under load, not of being severed. But doubt lingered, and Whymper, fairly or not, was seen by many as responsible. He had organized the climb, had assembled the team, had made the decisions. He was haunted by it for the rest of his life. In his later writings, he never fully addressed the conflicted feelings, the pride in the achievement balanced against the guilt over the deaths. He continued mountaineering, made many more climbs, including pioneering routes in the Andes. But the Matterhorn tragedy hung over everything. The greatest triumph of his life was inextricably linked to its greatest tragedy. And the mountain itself, having finally been climbed, having finally yielded its summit, was forever changed in human perception. It was no longer simply difficult, it was deadly. The Matterhorn had taken 4 lives in giving up its first ascent. It would take many more in the years to follow. The mountain that had inspired such obsession had proven that obsession was not without cost. In the immediate aftermath, there was serious discussion about whether mountaineering should continue at all. If the sport could kill experienced climbers on what was supposed to be a moment of triumph, what was the point? Was the risk justified? Should it be allowed? These questions were debated in newspapers, in the Alpine Club, in British society generally. But mountaineering did continue, and in a strange way, the Matterhorn tragedy helped professionalize it, helped establish standards and practices that made climbing safer. The disaster prompted serious examination of equipment. Why had the rope been so thin? What was adequate strength for a climbing rope? How should ropes be tested and certified? These questions led to standards, to better equipment, to a focus on safety that had been lacking in the pioneering days. Guiding, too, became more formalized. The role of guides, their responsibilities, their training, all of this was scrutinized. What had gone wrong on the Matterhorn? Should Croz have refused to take Haddo, who was clearly the weakest climber? Should Taugwalder have insisted on better equipment? These questions led to the professionalization of guiding, to the establishment of guide associations, to training programs and certifications. And climbing technique itself was studied more carefully. The assumption had been that strong, determined men could climb most mountains through sheer willpower. The Matterhorn proved this was inadequate. Technical skill mattered. Understanding the mountain, the rock, the specific challenges of a route, these were not just helpful, but essential. The Golden Age was characterized by boldness and improvisation. The era that followed emphasized technique, preparation, and a systematic approach. The Matterhorn was climbed again, repeatedly. Just 3 days after the tragedy, Carrel and his Italian team returned and successfully completed their climb from the Italian side, achieving their goal, though no longer first. The Southwest Ridge, the Italian Ridge, became an established route, and the Hornley Ridge, proven by Whymper's ascent, became the standard route, the way most people would subsequently climb the mountain. But the mountain extracted its price. Not every ascent succeeded. Not everyone who attempted it returned. The Matterhorn gained a reputation, the mountain of mountains, but also the killer mountain. Statistics accumulated. By the end of the 19th century, dozens of people had died on the Matterhorn. By the end of the 20th century, the number would be in the hundreds. Even today, several people die on the mountain almost every year. The dangers are multiple and overlapping. The rock, for all its solidity, is prone to rockfall, blocks loosened by frost cycles, by the passage of other climbers, by simple gravity and erosion. The weather changes rapidly. A clear morning can become a deadly afternoon storm with little warning. The altitude, while not extreme by Himalayan standards, is sufficient to cause problems: headaches, nausea, impaired judgment. The steepness means that a fall is likely to be long and fatal. And the crowds, as the mountain became famous, as climbing it became a badge of achievement, as guide services made it accessible to anyone with sufficient money and reasonable fitness, the sheer number of people on the mountain increased the danger for everyone. The four ridges of the Matterhorn each have their own character, their own challenges, their own history of ascents and tragedies. The Hornli Ridge, the standard route from Zermatt, is the most climbed. It is still not easy, rated AD, assez difficile, fairly difficult in the French system. It requires solid rock climbing ability, comfort with exposure, and good physical fitness. The route is now equipped with fixed ropes in the most difficult sections, but these are aids, not guarantees. People still fall, people still die. The Italian ridge, Carrel's route, is longer and in many ways more demanding. The rock is less solid, the route less obvious. It sees fewer ascents than the Hornli, partly because Breuil, now called Cervinia, developed less as a climbing center than Zermatt, partly because the route itself is simply harder. But it has its devotees, those who want a more challenging, less crowded experience, or those like Carrel who feel a connection to the Italian side of the mountain. The Zermatt Ridge on the west face of the mountain was first climbed in 1879 by a British team including Albert Mummery, one of the great mountaineers of the late 19th century. It is a serious undertaking, long, technical, exposed. The rock here is mixed, gneiss and schist, requiring different techniques. It is less climbed than the other ridges, attracting experienced mountaineers looking for challenge rather than tourists seeking to check off a famous peak. And the Fergan Ridge on the eastern face is the hardest of the four, the last to be fully climbed. Partial ascents were made in the late 19th century, but the complete ridge from base to summit was not achieved until 1941. It is long, technical, objectively dangerous with rockfall and difficult route finding. It remains a serious challenge even for experienced alpinists. But the ultimate challenge on the Matterhorn is not the ridges, but the faces, the great walls between the ridges, thousands of feet of steep rock and ice, swept by avalanches, festooned with hanging glaciers, exposed to weather and rockfall. And the greatest of these, the face that became the ultimate test, the climb that defined an era, was the north face. The north face of the Matterhorn is over 1,000 meters of near vertical rock and ice, facing perpetually away from the sun, cold and forbidding. It is not the largest north face in the Alps. That distinction belongs to the Eiger, but it is among the most serious. Through the late 19th and early 20th centuries, it was considered unclimbable. The rock is poor in sections, mixed with ice, prone to rockfall, exposed to storms. Multiple parties attempted it, multiple parties retreated or died. The first serious attempt was in 1911 by 3 Italian climbers. They got high on the face before being forced back by conditions. Through the 1920s, various climbers examined the route, studied it from a distance, tried approaches, but the face repelled them all. It had a reputation. The north face was where good climbers went to die. Finally, in 1931, 2 German brothers, Franz and Toni Schmith, succeeded. They climbed for 2 days, bivouacking on a tiny ledge on the face, completing the route in what was considered a masterpiece of technical climbing and mental toughness. Their ascent was celebrated as a major achievement, comparable to the first ascent of the mountain itself. The north face was climbed. But like Whymper's first ascent, the conquest of the north face was just the beginning. Other routes were found on the face, variations, direct lines, extreme challenges. And as climbing techniques improved, as equipment got better, the standards of what was possible on the Matterhorn rose. Winter ascents, once unthinkable, were achieved. Solo ascents, climbing without partners or ropes, were accomplished. Speed ascents, racing from base to summit and back in hours rather than days, became a pursuit. Each of these pushing of boundaries required its own kind of courage, its own acceptance of risk. Walter Bonatti, the great Italian mountaineer, made a solo winter ascent of the North Face in 1965, the centennial of Whymper's first ascent. It took him 6 days, alone on the face in February, enduring cold and storms that would have killed most people. His success was seen as one of the greatest achievements in mountaineering history, not just for the technical difficulty, but for the mental strength required to spend nearly a week alone on that hostile wall.
Speed climbing on the Matterhorn began in earnest in the late 20th century. How fast could someone climb from Zermatt to the summit and back? The times dropped steadily. Hours, then sub-3 hours, then under 2 hours for the strongest climbers. In 2015, a Swiss climber named Danny Arnold soloed the Hornli Ridge in 1 hour 46 minutes, a time that seems almost impossible given the vertical distance and technical terrain involved. But he did it, and his record stands as testament to how far human capability on the mountain has evolved since Whymper's day. Yet, for all the evolution in technique and equipment, for all the records and achievements, the Matterhorn remains fundamentally dangerous. The mountain has not changed. The same rockfall hazards exist, the same weather patterns, the same steep rock and exposure. What has changed is human capability and willingness to accept risk. And the mountain continues to exact its toll. Several people die on the Matterhorn most years. Sometimes they are inexperienced, attempting something beyond their ability. Sometimes they are unlucky, in the wrong place when rockfall occurs or weather turns. And sometimes they are experienced mountaineers who simply make one small mistake on terrain that does not forgive mistakes. The relationship between guides and clients on the Matterhorn is complex and has evolved significantly since Carrel and Taugwalder's time. In the early days, guides were local men who knew the mountains from necessity, hunters, shepherds, men who crossed passes and high terrain as part of their work. They became guides because wealthy foreigners would pay for their knowledge and skills. The relationship was transactional, but also personal. Guides and clients often climbed together repeatedly, developing relationships, trust. As guiding became professionalized, as it became a career rather than a sideline, the dynamic shifted. Guide associations formed, establishing standards and training. Becoming a certified mountain guide in Switzerland or Italy now requires years of training, passing difficult exams, demonstrating technical skill and judgment. Guides are professionals, experts in their field, but they are also service providers, and their clients are paying customers with varying degrees of experience and unrealistic expectations. On the Matterhorn, this tension is acute. Many clients hire guides to take them up the mountain despite having limited climbing experience. They may be fit, determined, willing to try hard, but they lack the technical skills and mountain judgment that only experience provides. A guide must assess each client, must determine whether they are capable of the climb, must sometimes refuse to take people who really want to go but simply cannot do it safely. And even when the guide agrees, even when the client is capable, the guide carries enormous responsibility. They are making decisions that affect not just their own life, but their clients'. And if something goes wrong, if the client is injured or killed, the guide bears that burden. The economics of guiding on the Matterhorn are significant. Zermatt, once an isolated farming village, is now an international resort town.
The train station sees thousands of visitors weekly. Hotels range from budget to ultra-luxury. Restaurants, shops, guide services, an entire economy built around proximity to the mountain. Climbing the Matterhorn via a guide service costs several $1,000s, including preparation climbs, the guide's fee, lodging at the Hornley hut. For the guides, this is their livelihood. For Zermatt, mountaineering and mountain tourism are the economic foundation. But this commercialization comes with costs. The Hornley Ridge on a good weather day in July or August can see 100 people or more, queued up on the fixed ropes, waiting at bottlenecks, crowded into the Hornley hut the night before their summit attempt. The mountain that Whymper climbed in solitude is now a crowded highway during peak season. This creates both safety issues, more people means more rockfall, more chances of mistakes, and experiential ones. The wilderness experience, the sense of adventure and exploration, is diminished when you are climbing in a crowd. There have been calls to limit numbers, to require permits, to control access. Some guides support this, arguing it would improve safety and experience. Others resist, seeing it as restricting freedom and potentially their livelihood. The debate continues, with no clear resolution. Meanwhile, the mountain endures the traffic and occasionally extracts its price. Rescue on the Matterhorn has evolved from nearly impossible to highly sophisticated but still dangerous. In Whymper's time, if you were injured high on the mountain, your survival depended entirely on your companions being able to help you down. There was no outside assistance, no way to call for help, no possibility of rescue from above. Many early mountaineering deaths occurred not from the initial accident, but from the impossibility of getting the injured person to safety. The development of mountain rescue services changed this. By the early 20th century, organized teams existed in the major alpine centers, trained in rescue techniques, able to respond to accidents. But reaching someone high on the Matterhorn was still incredibly difficult and dangerous. Rescue teams had to climb up, reach the victim, and either help them down or carry them, all while exposed to the same dangers that caused the accident in the first place. Helicopter rescue transformed the equation. By the 1960s, helicopters were being used for mountain rescue in the Alps. Their ability to reach high-altitude locations quickly, to extract injured climbers without needing to descend on foot, saved countless lives. But helicopter operations on the Matterhorn are challenging. The mountain's height, the thin air, the strong winds, the limited flat areas for landing. Pilots must be skilled and experienced, and helicopters cannot fly in all conditions. Bad weather grounds them, leaving climbers to self-rescue or wait. Modern rescue on the Matterhorn typically involves a helicopter flying as close as possible, hovering while a rescuer is lowered on a cable to reach the victim. Then both are winched up. It is technical, dangerous work. Rescue pilots and crew in the Alps are among the best in the world, executing operations that would be considered impossible elsewhere. But even with helicopters, even with skilled teams, rescue is not guaranteed. The mountain is still remote, still dangerous, and assistance, while available, is not instantaneous. The Matterhorn's presence in culture extends far beyond mountaineering. Its distinctive profile makes it perhaps the most recognizable mountain on Earth. It has been reproduced, stylized, and commercialized in countless ways. The Toblerone chocolate bar, manufactured in Switzerland, features the Matterhorn's triangular shape on its packaging. The Paramount Pictures logo, a mountain surrounded by stars, is said to be inspired by the Matterhorn's profile, sketched by founder W.W. Hodgkinson during a meeting. Disneyland's Matterhorn bobsleds, built in 1959, brought a stylized version of the mountain to California, making it familiar to millions who will never see the real peak. Hotels, restaurants, products of all kinds use the Matterhorn image, leveraging its immediate recognition and positive associations: challenge, achievement, Switzerland, quality. In art, the Matterhorn has been painted and photographed endlessly. 19th-century Romantic painters were drawn to its dramatic form. Alpine Club publications featured engravings and illustrations of the peak. With the advent of photography, the Matterhorn became one of the most photographed mountains, its image reproduced in postcards, calendars, magazines. Every amateur photographer in Zermatt points a camera at the mountain. Professional photographers have captured it in every season, every light, from every angle. Literature has also been drawn to the Matterhorn. Whymper's own account, Scrambles Amongst the Alps, published in 1871, became a bestseller and remains in print. It's a remarkable book, part adventure narrative, part climbing guide, part meditation on loss and achievement. Whymper's description of the 1865 tragedy is gripping and haunting. The book helped establish mountaineering literature as a genre. Other writers have tackled the Matterhorn. Numerous accounts of climbs, both successful and failed, have been published. The mountain appears in novels, in poetry, in philosophical works using it as a metaphor. The Matterhorn represents challenge, represents danger, represents the intersection of human ambition and natural reality. It is a rich symbol, capable of carrying multiple meanings. In Switzerland, the Matterhorn is a national icon, part of the country's identity. It appears on tourism materials, on stamps, on currency. It is the mountain that represents Switzerland to the world, despite not being the country's highest peak. That distinction belongs to the Dufour-Spitze. But the Matterhorn's visual impact trumps mere altitude. It is instantly recognizable, distinctively Swiss, a source of national pride. This identification has practical implications. The Swiss take the Matterhorn seriously, its preservation, its management, the balance between access and protection. Environmental concerns are real. Climate change is affecting the mountain visibly. Glaciers are retreating, permafrost is melting, rockfall is increasing as frozen rock thaws. The Hornley Ridge route has become more dangerous in recent years due to increasing rockfall, a direct result of warming temperatures destabilizing the rock. These changes worry guides and climbers. The mountain they know is changing, becoming more dangerous, less predictable. Routes that were solid are now loose. Sections that were ice are now bare rock, or vice versa. The climbing season may be shortening as summer temperatures make certain routes too hazardous with constant rockfall. What happens when the Matterhorn becomes too dangerous to climb safely? This is not an abstract question. It is a real possibility within the lifetimes of current climbers. Efforts to monitor and adapt are ongoing. Scientists study the mountain's changing conditions. The Swiss Alpine Club and local authorities consider route closures or modifications. Guide associations adjust their practices based on current conditions, but there are limits to adaptation. If fundamental changes occur, if major portions of the mountain become unstable, if the standard routes become unjustifiably dangerous, then access may have to be restricted significantly. The irony is not lost on anyone involved. The Matterhorn, climbed first in 1865 at the height of the Industrial Revolution, may become unclimbable due to climate change caused by the industrial civilization that made mountaineering possible. The same economic development that allowed people the leisure time and resources to climb mountains is altering those mountains, potentially putting them beyond reach. For now, the Matterhorn remains climbable. People still arrive in Zermatt with dreams of standing on the summit. Guides still lead clients up the Hornley Ridge. Experienced alpinists still attempt the harder routes, the Italian Ridge, the Zmutt, the North Face. The mountain continues its role as testing ground, as symbol, as challenge.
But it does so with the weight of history. Every person who climbs the Matterhorn climbs in the shadow of those who came before. Whymper and Carrel, Croz and the others who died in 1865, the Schmid brothers on the North Face, Bonatti in winter, the hundreds of others who have succeeded and the hundreds who have died trying. The mountain carries these stories, these ghosts, these accumulated meanings. Standing on the summit today, if you're fortunate enough and skilled enough to reach it, you stand where Whymper stood, where he experienced his brief moment of triumph before the tragedy of the descent. You see what he saw,
the sweep of the Alps, the Italian plain, the impossibly vast view in all directions. You feel what he felt, the satisfaction of reaching the top, the physical exhaustion, the awareness of the descent still to come. And if you know the history, you feel the weight of it. 4 men died on this mountain within hours of the first ascent. Hundreds more have died since. You stand on stone that has claimed lives, that will claim lives again, that is indifferent to human ambition and human tragedy alike. This is the essence of the Matterhorn's hold on human imagination. It is not just a mountain, it is a stage where human drama has played out repeatedly, where achievement and disaster intertwine, where we test ourselves against something that does not care whether we succeed or fail. It is beautiful and deadly, compelling and dangerous, an icon and a reality. The granite and gneiss that form the mountain existed for millions of years before humans noticed them, will exist for millions more after we are gone. The pyramid shape that we find so aesthetically pleasing is simply the result of erosion from 4 directions, nothing more. The mountain has no consciousness, no intention, no feelings about being climbed or not climbed. It simply exists, a form shaped by geology, persisting until geology reshapes it. But to human beings, it is so much more. It is challenge and symbol, testing ground and memorial, destination and warning. It is where the golden age of alpinism ended in tragedy. It is where modern mountaineering learned lessons written in blood. It is where thousands have tested themselves, where hundreds have died, where the relationship between human ambition and natural reality is made starkly visible. The story of the Matterhorn is ultimately a story about us, about what we seek in mountains, what we're willing to risk, how we respond to challenge and danger and beauty. The mountain itself is unchanging on human timescales, but its meaning shifts with each generation. To the people of medieval Zermatt, it was a frightening presence to be avoided. To the romantic poets and artists, it was sublime to be admired from a distance. To Whymper and his contemporaries, it was a problem to be solved, a summit to be reached. To modern climbers, it is all these things and more. A classic climb, a milestone, a test, a privilege, a responsibility. The birth of Alpine Lore that the Matterhorn represents is not just about climbing technique or safety equipment or the professionalization of guiding, though it encompasses all those things. It is about the transformation of mountains in human consciousness, from places of fear to places of aspiration. It is about the peculiar human drive to go where we are not designed to go, to test ourselves against environments hostile to our survival, to find meaning in difficulty and danger. And it is about the cost. The Matterhorn demanded lives for its first ascent and has continued demanding them ever since. Every person who climbs it must reckon with that history, must accept that the mountain is dangerous, that skill and preparation reduce risk but do not eliminate it, that accidents happen and people die. The lore of the Alps, born on the Matterhorn slopes, is written not just in triumph but in tragedy, not just in summit registers, but in cemetery stones. The pyramid stands. It has stood through human history, will stand through our future. Climbers will come, seasons will pass, some will succeed and some will fail and some will not return. The mountain remains, indifferent and magnificent, a granite memorial to human ambition and human limitation, to what we achieve and what we lose in the achieving. The Matterhorn endures, and so does our fascination with it, our need to climb it, our willingness to risk everything for the view from the top and the knowledge that we made it, that we stood where Whymper stood, that we touched the summit of the pyramid and returned to tell the story. This is the Matterhorn, mountain and symbol, reality and legend, granite and lore. eternal pyramid rising above the Alps, testing ground for human courage and human folly, beautiful and deadly, compelling and unforgiving, forever drawing people upward toward its summit, forever demanding respect and sometimes exacting payment, forever standing as a reminder that some challenges endure, that some tests remain, that some mountains, no matter how many times they are climbed, never become ordinary, never lose their power to inspire and intimidate, never cease being what they have always been: supreme, difficult, dangerous, irresistible. The Matterhorn stands, and we climb, and the story continues, written in footsteps on stone, in records of ascents and tragedies, in the accumulated lore of a century and a half of alpinism, in the knowledge that this mountain, this particular pyramid of granite thrust from the earth by ancient forces and carved by ice into impossible geometry, will outlast us all, will continue to test and challenge and take and give, will remain what it has always been: a mountain like no other, the mountain above all mountains, the Matterhorn.
The decades following Whymper's tragic triumph saw the Matterhorn transform from wilderness to theater, from unknown peak to a stage upon which the evolution of mountaineering itself would be performed. Each season brought new climbers, new attempts, new variations on the original routes, and each season added to the growing mythology, the sense that this mountain was different, special, that climbing it meant something beyond the simple physical act of reaching a summit. The progression of ascents tells its own story about the development of mountaineering as a pursuit. In the immediate years after 1865, climbs were still expeditions, serious undertakings requiring multiple guides, substantial equipment, days of approach and climbing. But gradually, as knowledge of the routes accumulated, as techniques improved, as fixed ropes and huts made certain sections safer or more accessible, the mountain became less of an exploration and more of a known challenge. This democratization had profound effects. By the 1880s, the Matterhorn was being climbed regularly each summer season, not frequently by modern standards, perhaps a few dozen ascents per year, but regularly enough that it was no longer headline news when someone reached the summit. The extraordinary had become, if not ordinary, at least repeatable. This represented a fundamental shift. Mountains that had once been one-time conquests were now climbs that could be repeated, that could be guided, that could become part of a climbing resume rather than a life's singular achievement. Lucy Walker, in 1871, became the first woman to climb the Matterhorn, reaching the summit via the Hornley Ridge with her father and guides. Her ascent challenged assumptions about women's capabilities in mountaineering, though these assumptions would persist for decades more. Walker was an accomplished alpinist, having made numerous first female ascents in the Alps. Her Matterhorn climb was technically well executed and demonstrated that the mountain was not exclusively male territory, though the cultural barriers to women's participation in mountaineering would take generations to fully erode. The inclusion of women in alpine climbing was part of a broader expansion of who could participate in mountaineering. In the early days, it had been almost exclusively British upper-class men with the time and money for extended alpine seasons. But as guiding became more established, as transportation improved, as knowledge spread, the demographic expanded. Middle-class professionals made climbing trips, scientists used mountains as laboratories, artists came to paint and photograph. The Alps became accessible to a broader swath of European and increasingly American society. This expansion brought its own tensions. The pioneering alpinists, members of the Alpine Club and similar organizations, sometimes looked down on later climbers as tourists rather than true mountaineers. There was a sense that something had been lost, that when climbing required exploration, when routes were unknown and outcomes uncertain, there was a purity that commercial guiding and established routes had diminished. This debate between adventure and access, between exploration and tourism, between preserving wilderness and making it available, would echo through mountaineering history and continues today. On the Matterhorn, this tension was particularly acute because the mountain was both technically demanding and internationally famous. It attracted serious climbers pursuing challenge, but also people drawn by the name, by the icon, by the desire to claim they had climbed the Matterhorn, regardless of whether they had the skills to do so safely. Guides found themselves in difficult positions, turning away paying clients who desperately wanted the ascent but lacked ability, or taking them and managing enormous risk, or occasionally acquiescing against their better judgment with tragic results. The guides themselves evolved as a professional class. In the beginning, men like Carell and the Togwalders were farmers and herders who guided part-time, but as mountaineering expanded, full-time professional guides emerged. These were men who made their living from the mountains, who climbed not primarily for themselves, but to enable others' climbs, who carried the responsibility not just for their own safety, but for their clients' lives. This created a unique psychology. A guide might climb the same mountain dozens or hundreds of times, repeating routes they knew intimately, managing clients of varying abilities, always responsible, always vigilant, never able to fully relax even on terrain they could navigate blindfolded. The mental discipline required was extraordinary. Boredom was a danger. When you have climbed a route 50 times, maintaining focus on the 51st requires conscious effort, yet a moment's inattention could be fatal. The best guides were remarkable individuals. They combined technical skill with judgment, strength with patience, confidence with appropriate caution. They could assess a client's abilities accurately, could push when pushing was needed and hold back when it wasn't, could make split-second decisions about weather and conditions and risk, and they carried the weight of their failures. When a client died, even if the death was not the guide's fault, even if the client made a mistake or was simply unlucky, the guide bore that burden. It was their responsibility, their profession, their life's work.
Christian Klucker, one of the great guides of the late 19th and early 20th centuries, wrote about this burden. He described the constant anxiety, the feeling of responsibility that never lifted, the knowledge that every decision mattered. He also wrote about the satisfaction of helping someone achieve something difficult, of sharing mountain experiences with clients who became friends, of the craft itself, the technical skills and mountain knowledge that defined his profession. But the anxiety was always present, always underlying everything else. The Matterhorn's different faces and ridges attracted different types of climbers and developed different reputations. The Hornley Ridge became the standard route, the way most guided parties approached the mountain. It was well established, relatively safe by Matterhorn standards, with the Hornley hut providing shelter at 3,260 meters, allowing a reasonable summit day from there. But relatively safe is still serious. The Hornley demands respect, technical ability, and good conditions. Dozens have died on this route, many of them experienced climbers who made small mistakes or encountered bad luck. The Italian Ridge developed a reputation for being more committing, more serious. The route is longer, the rock quality more variable, the escape options fewer. Parties attempting it needed to be strong, self-sufficient, capable of handling difficult terrain without fixed ropes or pre-established anchors. It attracted alpinists rather than tourists, people for whom the challenge was the point, rather than simply claiming the summit. Mummery's climbing philosophy influenced generations. He argued that the value of a climb was not just in reaching the summit, but in how you reached it, that style mattered, that doing something difficult was more meaningful than doing something easy. This might seem obvious now, but in his era it was somewhat revolutionary. Many climbers of his time viewed mountains as obstacles to be surmounted by whatever means necessary. Mummery saw them as venues for elegant problem-solving, where the quality of the ascent mattered as much as the success. The Forgan Ridge, the last of the four to be climbed, proved the most challenging.
Attempts began in the 1880s, with parties reaching partway up before being forced back by difficulty or weather. The complete ridge, from the Col de la Tête de Lion to the summit, was not climbed until 1941 by two Italian guides, Enzo Benedetti and Luigi Carrel, nephew of Jean-Antoine Carrel. Their ascent required multiple days on the ridge, bivouacking in exposed positions, navigating extremely difficult rock climbing, demonstrating both technical skill and mental toughness. Each of these routes contributed to the Matterhorn's mythology. The mountain was not just one climb, but four, each with its own character, its own history, its own list of triumphs and tragedies. A climber could return to the Matterhorn repeatedly, climbing different routes, experiencing different aspects of the mountain. This multiplicity added to the appeal. The Matterhorn was inexhaustible, always offering new challenges. But it was the faces, particularly the north face, that represented the ultimate challenge. Through the late 19th and early 20th centuries, as the ridges were climbed and reclimbed, as standards rose and what had once seemed extreme became achievable, ambitious climbers began looking at the faces, those great walls between the ridges, thousands of feet of steep rock and ice, exposed to objective dangers, vastly more committing than the ridges. The north face of the Matterhorn was the most obvious and the most intimidating of these prizes. Over 1,000 meters of near vertical terrain, facing away from the sun, cold and dark and forbidding. Early attempts were disasters. Climbers would get partway up, realize the magnitude of what they had undertaken, and retreat if they were wise, or die if they were not. The face developed a grim reputation. By the 1920s, it was considered the last great problem in the Alps. The ridges had all been climbed, most faces had been climbed, but the north face of the Matterhorn remained untouched. Franz and Toni Schmidt, the German brothers who finally succeeded in 1931, were exceptional climbers. They had done numerous difficult routes in the Alps, had developed techniques for climbing steep ice and mixed terrain, had the mental toughness to commit to multi-day climbs on big faces. Their attempt on the Matterhorn north face was meticulously planned. They studied the face from a distance, identified the line they would follow, gathered appropriate equipment, waited for a good weather window.
The climb took 2 days. They started from Zermatt early on the first day, approached the base of the face, and began climbing. The initial sections were steep ice, requiring front pointing with crampons, swinging ice axes, slow upward progress. As they gained height, the face became a complex mix of rock and ice, requiring them to alternate between rock climbing technique and ice technique, to read the mountain constantly, to choose the best line moment by moment. They climbed through the day and into the night, bivouacking on a tiny ledge chopped from the ice, sitting side by side in the darkness with 1,000 meters of void below them and several hundred meters of unknown difficulty above. The cold was severe. Sleep was impossible. They waited for dawn, preparing themselves mentally for the second day. The next day brought the crux sections, steep technical climbing on poor rock, ice in the cracks, every move requiring full focus. They moved together on some sections, belayed each other on the hardest pitches, driven by determination and the knowledge that retreat from this high on the face would be extremely difficult. By mid-afternoon, they reached easier ground near the summit ridge. By late afternoon, they stood on the summit. Their descent via the Hornley Ridge was anticlimactic. After the intensity of the north face, the standard route seemed easy despite its steepness. They reached Zermatt exhausted but triumphant. They had climbed the last great face, had solved the last major problem in alpine mountaineering. Their ascent was recognized immediately as a landmark achievement, comparable to the first ascent of the mountain itself. But achievements in mountaineering are never final. Each solved problem reveals new problems. Each reached summit suggests new routes,
new challenges. The Schmidt brothers had climbed the north face by one line. What about other lines? What about climbing it in winter? What about soloing it? Each of these variations represented a new challenge, a new way to test human capability against the mountain. Walter Bonatti's solo winter ascent of the North Face in February 1965 represented perhaps the most extreme of these variations. Bonatti was one of the great alpinists of the 20th century, an Italian climber who had made numerous groundbreaking ascents, who had survived near-death experiences multiple times, who had pushed the boundaries of what was considered possible in the mountains. His decision to solo the Matterhorn North Face in winter was seen by many as suicidal. The face that had taken the Schmidt brothers 2 days in summer, with 2 climbers able to help each other, Bonatti would attempt alone, in February, when temperatures could drop to -30°C, when storms could arrive without warning, when a mistake meant certain death with no possibility of rescue. He spent 6 days on the face, 6 days alone on that vast wall of ice and rock, bivouacking each night in positions that offered minimal shelter, climbing through storms, dealing with extreme cold, managing fear and exhaustion, and the constant awareness that he was utterly alone, that if anything went wrong, there was no help, no backup, no rescue. The mental strength required was extraordinary. Physical toughness could get you partway. Technical skill was necessary but not sufficient. What mattered most was the ability to control your mind, to function despite cold and fear and exhaustion, to make good decisions when every instinct screamed to retreat or to give up. Bonatti succeeded. He reached the summit on the 6th day, descended the Hornley Ridge, and emerged from the ordeal having accomplished something that redefined what was possible. His ascent was celebrated as one of the greatest mountaineering achievements of all time, not just for the technical difficulty, but for the psychological and physical demands he had overcome. Speed climbing represented another dimension of challenge. Once routes were known, once techniques were refined, how fast could they be climbed? Speed climbing is controversial in mountaineering. Purists argue that it misses the point, that rushing through a mountain experience loses something essential. But speed climbing is also a valid form of challenge, testing physical fitness, efficiency of movement, mental focus, and deep knowledge of the route. A fast ascent requires eliminating all wasted motion, climbing at the edge of control, maintaining intensity for hours. On the Matterhorn, speed records have fallen steadily. What took Whymper and his party most of a day in 1865 can now be done by elite climbers in under 2 hours. Donnie Arnold's 2015 ascent of the Hornley Ridge in 1 hour 46 minutes represents the current standard, an astonishing time that requires visualizing, starting from the Hornley Hut at 3,260 meters, climbing over 1,200 vertical meters of technical rock, reaching the summit at 4,478 meters, all in less than 2 hours. Arnold was essentially running up the mountain, soloing without a rope, moving with perfect efficiency, knowing every handhold, every step, maintaining complete focus for nearly 2 hours. Such ascents push human capability, but also raise questions. Is this mountaineering, or is it sport climbing on a big mountain? Does the speed diminish the experience or enhance it? These debates have no definitive answers. They reflect different philosophies about what mountains mean and why we climb them. For Arnold and climbers like him, the speed ascent is a legitimate expression of mastery, a demonstration of complete knowledge and physical capability. For others, it represents a commodification of the mountain experience, reducing something profound to a timed athletic event. The Matterhorn has absorbed all these approaches, all these philosophies. It is big enough, famous enough, varied enough to accommodate traditional ascents and speed ascents, guided clients and elite soloists, photographers and scientists, tourists and hardcore alpinists. On a busy summer day, the Hornley Ridge might see guided parties moving carefully on the fixed ropes, elite climbers soloing rapidly past them, rescue helicopters flying overhead, and someone on the north face attempting a hard route. The mountain contains multitudes.
But this very popularity creates problems. The Hornley Ridge, on a clear day in high season, can have 100 or more people on it.
This creates bottlenecks at difficult sections, delays waiting for slower parties, increased rockfall danger from people above, and a degraded experience for everyone. The sense of wilderness, of adventure, of being in a wild place is diminished when you are standing in line waiting your turn on a fixed rope. The environmental impact is also significant. 100 people climbing means 100 people using the Hornley hut, means waste disposal issues, water supply issues, erosion on the route from thousands of boots each season. The Swiss Alpine Club, which maintains the hut and manages the route, faces difficult decisions about how to balance access with preservation, how to maintain safety without completely domesticating the mountain, how to respect the Matterhorn's wild character while accommodating the demands of modern tourism. Some have proposed permit systems, limiting the number of people who can climb on a given day. This works on some mountains. Denali in Alaska, for instance, requires climbing permits and limits numbers, but implementing this on the Matterhorn faces practical and political obstacles. Who would decide who gets permits? What criteria would be used? How would it be enforced? The mountain straddles two countries, Switzerland and Italy, complicating any regulatory approach. And there is resistance from guides whose livelihoods depend on taking clients up the mountain, from the tourism industry in Zermatt, from climbers who resist any restriction on mountain access. So the situation persists. The mountain is crowded in season, less crowded in shoulder seasons and winter, and the various stakeholders continue to debate what should be done. Meanwhile, the Matterhorn itself is changing in ways that may ultimately force changes in how it is climbed. Climate change is affecting the mountain profoundly. The glaciers that surround the Matterhorn are retreating. The Gorner Glacier, the Zmutt Glacier, all the ice that has carved and continues to shape the mountain is disappearing at accelerating rates. Measurements show meters of ice loss per year in recent decades. This has multiple effects. First, approach routes are changing. Glaciers that once provided straightforward access to the base of climbing routes are now broken by crevices, complicated by ice falls, or have retreated entirely, leaving bare rock that requires different approach strategies. Routes that were well established are now more difficult or dangerous to reach. Second, and more seriously, the mountain itself is becoming less stable. The rock of the Matterhorn is held together partially by ice. Water seeps into cracks, freezes, acts as cement binding the rock together. As temperatures warm, this ice melts. The rock loosens. Entire sections that were solid are now prone to rockfall. The Hornley Ridge has experienced increasing rockfall in recent years, directly attributable to permafrost thaw. Several large rock collapses have occurred, altering sections of the route, killing climbers unfortunate enough to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. This is not a theoretical future problem. It is happening now. Guides report that routes they have climbed for decades are now objectively more dangerous. Rockfall that used to be occasional is now frequent. The climbing season, traditionally July through September, may be shortening as early and late season conditions become too unstable. Some guides have suggested that within a few decades, the standard routes on the Matterhorn may become too dangerous to climb safely, at least during certain parts of the year. The irony is profound. The economic development that made mountaineering possible, that created the leisure time and resources for people to climb for recreation, that built the transportation and tourism infrastructure of Zermatt, is now threatening the mountain itself. The carbon emissions from all those flights and trains and helicopters, from heating the hotels and huts, from the industrial civilization that climbing depends on, are warming the climate and destabilizing the mountains we climb. What happens to the Matterhorn if it becomes too dangerous to climb? This is not a rhetorical question. If rockfall increases to the point where the risk cannot be managed, if the routes become fundamentally unstable, then access will have to be restricted. The mountain that has been climbed continuously since 1865 might return to being unclimbed, not because it is too difficult, but because it is too dangerous, because the acceptable risk has been exceeded. Some argue that this would be appropriate, even poetic, that the mountain would reclaim itself, that the era of human access would be revealed as a brief window between the age when it was too hard and the age when it was too unstable. Others view it as a tragedy, the loss of a climbing icon, a diminishment of human experience and possibility. Both perspectives have validity. For now, people still climb. The Hornli still fills on summer nights with climbers preparing for pre-dawn starts. Guides still lead clients up the fixed ropes. Elite climbers still test themselves on the harder routes and faces. The mountain still stands, still challenges, still occasionally kills, and still rewards those who succeed with views and experiences that justify the effort and risk. The Matterhorn's role in shaping mountaineering culture extends beyond the technical aspects of climbing. The mountain has become symbolic, a shorthand for achievement and challenge. "I climbed the Matterhorn" carries weight beyond the literal meaning. It signifies not just that someone made a difficult climb, but that they accomplished something culturally significant, that they joined a tradition stretching back to Whymper, that they tested themselves against a standard recognized globally.
Modern rescue on the Matterhorn typically involves a helicopter flying as close as possible, hovering while a rescuer is lowered on a cable to reach the victim. Then both are winched up. It is technical, dangerous work. Rescue pilots and crew in the Alps are among the best in the world, executing operations that would be considered impossible elsewhere. But even with helicopters, even with skilled teams, rescue is not guaranteed. The mountain is still remote, still dangerous, and assistance, while available, is not instantaneous. The Matterhorn's presence in culture extends far beyond mountaineering. Its distinctive profile makes it perhaps the most recognizable mountain on Earth. It has been reproduced, stylized, and commercialized in countless ways. The Toblerone chocolate bar, manufactured in Switzerland, features the Matterhorn's triangular shape on its packaging. The Paramount Pictures logo, a mountain surrounded by stars, is said to be inspired by the Matterhorn's profile, sketched by founder W. Hodgkinson during a meeting. Disneyland's Matterhorn bobsleds, built in 1959, brought a stylized version of the mountain to California, making it familiar to millions who will never see the real peak. Hotels, restaurants, products of all kinds use the Matterhorn image, leveraging its immediate recognition and positive associations: challenge, achievement, Switzerland, quality. In art, the Matterhorn has been painted and photographed endlessly. 19th century Romantic painters were drawn to its dramatic form. Alpine club publications featured engravings and illustrations of the peak. With the advent of photography, the Matterhorn became one of the most photographed mountains, its image reproduced in postcards, calendars, magazines. Every amateur photographer in Zermatt points a camera at the mountain. Professional photographers have captured it in every season, every light, from every angle. Literature has also been drawn to the Matterhorn. Whymper's own account, Scrambles Amongst the Alps, published in 1871, became a bestseller and remains in print. It's a remarkable book, part adventure narrative, part climbing guide, part meditation on loss and achievement. Whymper's description of the 1865 tragedy is gripping and haunting. The book helped establish mountaineering literature as a genre. Other writers have tackled the Matterhorn. Numerous accounts of climbs, both successful and failed, have been published. The mountain appears in novels, in poetry, in philosophical works using it as a metaphor. The Matterhorn represents challenge, represents danger, represents the intersection of human ambition and natural reality. It is a rich symbol, capable of carrying multiple meanings. In Switzerland, the Matterhorn is a national icon, part of the country's identity. It appears on tourism materials, on stamps, on currency. It is the mountain that represents Switzerland to the world, despite not being the country's highest peak. That distinction belongs to the Dufour-Spitze. But the Matterhorn's visual impact trumps mere altitude. It is instantly recognizable, distinctively Swiss, a source of national pride.
This identification has practical implications. The Swiss take the Matterhorn seriously, its preservation, its management, the balance between access and protection. Environmental concerns are real. Climate change is affecting the mountain visibly. Glaciers are retreating, permafrost is melting, rockfall is increasing as frozen rock thaws. The Hornley Ridge route has become more dangerous in recent years due to increasing rockfall, a direct result of warming temperatures destabilizing the rock. These changes worry guides and climbers. The mountain they know is changing, becoming more dangerous, less predictable. Routes that were solid are now loose. Sections that were ice are now bare rock, or vice versa. The climbing season may be shortening as summer temperatures make certain routes too hazardous with constant rockfall. What happens when the Matterhorn becomes too dangerous to climb safely? This is not an abstract question. It is a real possibility within the lifetimes of current climbers. Efforts to monitor and adapt are ongoing. Scientists study the mountain's changing conditions. The Swiss Alpine Club and local authorities consider route closures or modifications. Guide associations adjust their practices based on current conditions, but there are limits to adaptation. If fundamental changes occur, if major portions of the mountain become unstable, if the standard routes become unjustifiably dangerous, then access may have to be restricted significantly. The irony is not lost on anyone involved. The Matterhorn, climbed first in 1865 at the height of the Industrial Revolution, may become unclimbable due to climate change caused by the industrial civilization that made mountaineering possible. The same economic development that allowed people the leisure time and resources to climb mountains is altering those mountains, potentially putting them beyond reach. For now, the Matterhorn remains climbable. People still arrive in Zermatt with dreams of standing on the summit. Guides still lead clients up the Hornley Ridge. Experienced alpinists still attempt the harder routes, the Italian Ridge, the Zmutt, the North Face. The mountain continues its role as testing ground, as symbol, as challenge.
This creates a strange temporal awareness among contemporary Matterhorn climbers. When you climb the mountain now, you are climbing something ephemeral, something in transition. The route you follow may not exist in 50 years. The ice you cross may be gone. The rock that seems solid may have fallen away. You are witnessing and participating in a moment in the mountain's history, a brief window between what it was and what it will become. Some find this depressing, the sense that we are losing something, that future generations will not have access to the experiences we take for granted. Others find it motivating, a reason to climb now, to experience the mountain while it still exists in this form, to witness this moment in geological and human history. Both responses are understandable. We are living through a transition, and transitions are by nature unsettled, uncertain, marked by loss and change. The Matterhorn's cultural legacy will persist regardless of physical changes to the mountain. The stories of Whymper and Carroll, of the 1865 tragedy, of the Schmidt brothers and Bonatti and countless others, these stories are now part of mountaineering history, preserved in books and films and oral tradition. Future generations will know about the Matterhorn even if they cannot climb it, just as we know about ancient wonders that no longer exist. But there is something irreplaceable about direct experience. Reading about the Matterhorn is not the same as standing in Zermatt looking up at the pyramid. Seeing photographs is not the same as touching the rock, as breathing the thin air at altitude, as experiencing the exposure and difficulty and satisfaction of the climb. If the mountain becomes unclimbable, something will be lost that cannot be fully preserved in any other form. This is true of all places, all experiences, but it is particularly acute for mountains because they are already extreme environments, already at the margins of what humans can access and survive. The Matterhorn has never been easy. It has always been at the edge of the possible, always demanding serious commitment and accepting serious risk. If it tips over that edge into the impossible, if the risks become unjustifiable, then access ends and the mountain returns to being what it was before 1865,
visible, famous, known, but unvisited, a pyramid of stone existing in its own reality, separate from human activity. Perhaps there is something appropriate about that. The human era of Matterhorn climbing would be revealed as an interlude, a brief period between inaccessibility due to difficulty and inaccessibility due to instability. The mountain would reclaim itself, would exist again without the traffic and impact of thousands of climbers per year, would return to being simply geology, simply stone and ice shaped by forces indifferent to human presence. But that is speculation about a potential future. For now, in this present moment, the Matterhorn remains climbable. The routes are known. Guides lead clients. Climbers test themselves. The mountain continues its dual role as natural wonder and human challenge, as geological feature and cultural icon, as both the thing itself and the symbol of itself. The view of the Matterhorn from Zermatt remains one of the great sights in mountaineering. The pyramid rising at the head of the valley, dominating everything, drawing the eye inevitably upward. Early morning light hitting the east face, illuminating the rock, making the whole mountain glow pink and gold against the blue dawn sky. Storm clouds gathering around the summit, hiding the peak, creating drama and danger. The mountain in moonlight, the pyramid defined in silver and black, impossibly clear and sharp. Photographers have captured this view in every season, every light, every weather condition. It has been painted, drawn, sketched, reproduced in countless forms. But no reproduction captures the physical presence, the way the mountain feels when you are standing in the valley looking up at it. The scale, the steepness, the sense of mass and height and presence, these require direct experience. The mountain is not just an image, it is a physical reality. And that reality includes the way it affects you when you see it, the way it draws your attention, the way it makes you feel small and the world large, the way it exists so completely and undeniably as itself. This presence is part of why people climb it, not just for the challenge, not just for the achievement, but because the mountain compels response. It stands there, impossible to ignore, and something in human nature responds to that challenge, wants to engage with it, wants to climb it simply because it is there. To invoke Mallory's famous phrase about Everest, which applies equally to the Matterhorn. The Matterhorn has shaped Zermatt as much as Zermatt has shaped access to the Matterhorn. The village that once housed a few hundred subsistence farmers now holds thousands of visitors on any given summer night. Hotels range from budget hostels to ultra-luxury resorts. Restaurants serve every cuisine. Shops sell climbing equipment, souvenirs, high-end fashion. The train station connects to the Swiss rail network, providing easy access from anywhere in Europe. Electric taxis ferry people through the car-free streets. It is a thoroughly modern resort town, prosperous and sophisticated, existing because of proximity to the mountain.
The economic impact is enormous. Tourism supports thousands of jobs: hotel and restaurant staff, guides and ski instructors, shop workers and transport operators. The multiplier effect extends beyond Zermatt itself to the entire region. The Swiss economy benefits significantly from alpine tourism, and the Matterhorn is the flagship, the iconic image that draws people to Switzerland. But this economic dependence creates vulnerability. If access to the Matterhorn were lost, if the mountain became too dangerous to climb, what would happen to Zermatt? The skiing would remain, the slopes and lifts that operate in winter. The scenery would remain, people would still come to see the mountain even if they couldn't climb it. But something would be lost. The climbing culture, the mountaineering tradition, the sense of Zermatt as a serious alpinist center rather than just a scenic resort. All of this depends on the Matterhorn being climbable. Town leaders are aware of this. Planning discussions include climate adaptation, thinking about how tourism might need to evolve, how to maintain economic vitality if conditions change. There is discussion of positioning Zermatt as a year-round destination, less dependent on any single season or activity.
Investments in summer hiking infrastructure, in cultural amenities, in diversifying the economic base, all reflect awareness that depending entirely on the status quo is risky. But for now, the status quo persists. Summer brings climbers and hikers, winter brings skiers. The town prospers, the mountain looms over everything, defining the place, providing the reason for Zermatt's existence and prosperity. The relationship between town and mountain is symbiotic. Zermatt provides access to the Matterhorn, and the Matterhorn provides Zermatt's economic foundation. The guides of Zermatt maintain their tradition, passing skills and knowledge from generation to generation. Some come from old guiding families, sons and grandsons of guides, carrying on a profession that stretches back to the earliest days of alpinism. Others are newer to the profession, drawn to guiding by love of mountains and outdoor life. But all share the responsibility of safely leading clients in dangerous terrain. All carry the weight of that responsibility. All understand that their decisions determine whether people live or die. The best guides talk about the mountain with a mix of respect, familiarity, and wariness. They have climbed it dozens or hundreds of times, know its moods and dangers, can read conditions and make sound judgments, but they never become complacent, never assume the mountain is safe, never let familiarity breed contempt. The Matterhorn has killed too many people, including experienced guides, for anyone to take it lightly. Stories circulate among the guides. Close calls, successful rescues, clients who were stronger than expected or weaker, weather that turned suddenly, rockfall that barely missed them, days when everything went right and days when everything went wrong. These stories are not just entertainment, but teaching tools, ways of transmitting knowledge, reminding each other of dangers, reinforcing good practices. The oral tradition of guiding includes cautionary tales alongside triumph stories, keeping alive the awareness that the mountain is dangerous, that vigilance is essential, that luck matters as much as skill. The international climbing community maintains complex relationships with the Matterhorn. For some, it is a pilgrimage destination, a mountain they need to climb to feel complete as alpinists. For others, it is old news, a classic, but something they did years ago and have moved beyond. For beginners, it represents an aspirational goal, something to work toward. For elite climbers, it might be training, a tune-up climb before attempting something harder elsewhere. But almost everyone in mountaineering has some relationship with the Matterhorn, even if they have never climbed it. It is part of the common culture, the shared reference points. Mentioning the Matterhorn in a conversation with climbers triggers associations, memories, stories. People have opinions about the mountain, about the best routes, about whether it is overrated or underrated, about their own experiences or those of friends. The Matterhorn is woven into climbing culture in ways that transcend any individual's direct experience with it. This cultural embedding means the mountain exists not just physically, but in collective imagination. There is the physical Matterhorn, the rock and ice, the actual mountain you can climb. And there is the imagined Matterhorn, the icon, the symbol, the idea of the mountain that exists in photographs and stories and cultural references.
These two Matterhorns are related, but not identical. The imagined Matterhorn is perfect, always photogenic, always dramatic. The physical Matterhorn includes loose rock, rockfall danger, crowds on the Hernley Ridge, uncertain weather, all the messy reality that photographs often omit. Climbers experience both. The anticipation before climbing is often shaped by the imagined Matterhorn, the perfect pyramid, the historical significance, the sense of adventure. The actual climb involves the physical Matterhorn, the specific difficulties, the immediate concerns of weather and conditions, the physical effort of moving upward. And the memory afterward often blends the two, selectively remembering the dramatic and meaningful moments, forgetting or minimizing the tedious or uncomfortable parts. This is true of all significant climbs, but particularly acute for iconic mountains like the Matterhorn, where the cultural weight is so heavy. You climb not just a mountain, but an idea, a symbol, a piece of history. This can enhance the experience, giving it additional meaning, connecting your personal effort to a larger tradition, but it can also complicate it,
creating pressure and expectations that pure engagement with the mountain would not involve. The Matterhorn's pyramid form has sparked speculation and imagination beyond just mountaineering. The geometric perfection seems almost artificial, leading some to wonder whether it is entirely natural or whether ancient civilizations, or aliens in the more fringe theories, had a hand in shaping it. These ideas are nonsense. The formation is completely explained by erosion from 4 directions, a well-understood geological process that produces pyramidal peaks in many locations worldwide. But the speculation itself is interesting as a cultural phenomenon, revealing how humans respond to extreme regularity in nature, how we are so attuned to design and intention that we sometimes see it where only natural process exists. The Matterhorn's influence on other mountains is significant. Many peaks are described as the Matterhorn of region. Mount Assiniboine in Canada is called the Matterhorn of the Rockies. Machapuchare in Nepal is sometimes called the Matterhorn of the Himalayas. These comparisons leverage the fame of the Matterhorn, using it as a reference point that people will recognize. The comparisons are sometimes apt, mountains that genuinely have similar pyramidal forms, and sometimes forced, simply trading on the name recognition. This reflects the Matterhorn's status as the archetypal mountain, the standard against which others are measured. When people think mountain, many visualize something Matterhorn-like, a symmetrical pyramid rising from lower terrain, steep and dramatic. This is partly because the Matterhorn's image is so widely reproduced, has so thoroughly saturated visual culture that it has become the template. But it is also because the form is aesthetically powerful. That pyramid shape appeals to human visual perception in ways that more complex or irregular peaks do not. As we look towards the future of the Matterhorn, several trajectories are possible. In the optimistic scenario, climate stabilizes, or mitigation efforts succeed in limiting warming. The mountain remains climbable indefinitely, access is managed sustainably, and future generations can experience what we experience today. In the pessimistic scenario, warming continues unchecked, permafrost thaw accelerates, the mountain becomes objectively too dangerous to climb safely, and access is restricted or ends entirely. The most likely scenario is probably intermediate. Continued warming and change, making some routes more dangerous while others remain viable. A gradual adaptation, where the climbing community adjusts to new realities, finds new ways to engage with the mountain, accepts changes while trying to preserve what can be preserved. This will require flexibility, willingness to give up some things, perhaps the ability to climb certain routes at certain times, acceptance that the Matterhorn of 2050 or 2100 will be different from today's mountain. But change is nothing new for the Matterhorn. The mountain has been changing constantly throughout its existence, thrusting up from tectonic collision, carved by glaciers, shaped by erosion, slowly evolving. The rates of change are now faster than they have been, and the causes are anthropogenic rather than purely natural. But change itself is simply the continuation of processes that have always operated. The mountain was never static. We just imagined it was because geological change usually happens slowly enough that human lifespans don't perceive it.
The Matterhorn has been a classroom for this education for a century and a half. Lessons written in stone, sometimes in blood, always in experience. What works, what fails, what is safe, what is suicidal, what is worth attempting and what is not. All of this has been learned on the mountain's faces and ridges, learned slowly and painfully, and passed forward to those who come after. In the end, the story of the Matterhorn is inseparable from the story of mountaineering itself. The mountain defined an era, marked a transition, catalyzed developments in technique and equipment and ethics. It inspired generations of climbers, motivated them to push limits, showed them what was possible. It killed many and rewarded more, indifferent to the outcome, but serving as the arena where outcomes were determined. The pyramid stands, will stand, has always stood in geological terms.
will eventually fall, though not in any time frame humans need to consider. For now, for the foreseeable future of human civilization, the Matterhorn exists as it has existed, a mountain unlike any other, a pyramid of granite and gneiss rising from the valleys, a challenge and a symbol, a test and a teacher, beautiful and deadly, famous and feared, climbed and unclimbed, known and mysterious, the Matterhorn.